I'm Hugh Hewitt from the Salem News Channel studios inside the Beltway. I'm not at Beltway studio that I normally use because Xfinity Comcast decided that this was a good day to begin work on the local area transmitter, so nothing's working in my studio. So it was the quick dash to the Salem News Channel studios this morning before dawn. And as usual, for anyone in the Beltway who's driving to work right now, you know the Spout Run turnaround, which is when you miss the turnoff to go into Arlington, Roslyn, and you end up having to turn around on Spout Run. I did that this morning, and I'm not in a good mood because, of course, the Cleveland Guardians, God love them, they gave us a great year, but they sort of stumbled against the giant Yankees. So it's Yankees, Dodgers, and everyone's bored. Then, of course, Cleveland quarterback Deshaun Watson, never my favorite to begin with, though I do not wish injury on anyone, tore his Achilles tendon, and his $250 million contract is out the door. I doubt he'll ever take another snap for the Browns. I don't know. So we're in the tank-a-thon. And after today's program, I'm going to go vote early for Donald Trump and JD Vance for president and vice president. Although Senator Vance is coming up later on the show. Maybe he'll talk me out of it. I doubt it. Even though Donald Trump went to the Steelers game yesterday, I'm still going to vote for him. Cut number 17, Donald Trump at the Steelers game. Okay, this is one of those moments where you're both very, very happy because the candidate we need to win is going to win because the Steelers fans like him, and your heart is broken because the Steelers fans like him. So to my WPIT listeners, you got it, you did it. Play that again, would you? Because it's hard to get the Steelers fans on your side, right? I've only heard them boo Browns fans before. Cut number 17 one more time. The polls are just cratering for Kamala Harris. Now, that could all be wrong. Remember, I was on air live at NBC 30 Rock 8 years ago when Donald Trump was going to get destroyed by Hillary Clinton, and everybody knew that it was over, and you know the needle at the New York Times gave Trump a 10% chance of winning. Well, it's all reversed now. Kamala's cratering, and everyone says, well, Trump's got it in the bag. I don't believe that. I don't know if they know anything about nothing. All I know is that Jim Messina, Obama bro, went on MSNBC with Jen Psaki yesterday, cut number 1.
Time. I mean, if you think about, Jen, in politics, you have three things. You have time, you have money, and you have volunteers. And the one thing of those three you can't go get more of is time. And so there's really difficult decisions being made in Wilmington right now about what you do with her time, what you do with the surrogate's time. You know, there's competing things. The press team wants her on these TV interviews. The fundraising team wants her to do one more big event in X city. The battleground states are saying we've got to have her 3 more times in Michigan. And so, you know, making those decisions becomes the most important thing. It's why you see these campaign people on TV and they look absolutely exhausted because everyone is telling them they're a band of idiots and they should do it their way. And they have to make really, really difficult decisions.
Oh, no, they don't. They have to decide what they're going to do after they lose. Cut number 5 is Tim Walz in Durham, North Carolina yesterday.
Look, I know many people, if you say I'm tired of this, trust me, I am too. We're fatigued. We're fatigued from it.
He's been doing this for, what, 4 weeks? Tim Walz is tired of this? He should have my job. Do this 3 hours a day for 4 years because this campaign has been ongoing since 2020. Kamala Harris at a Milwaukee rally, if you want to call it a rally. She's up in Madison talking to the Nutto students. Gets interrupted by a pro-Palestinian heckler, and it's remarkable what she says at the end of this cut number 6.
Right now, I know what you're speaking of. I want the ceasefire.
But what about the genocide?
I want the war to end.
What about the genocide?
And I respect your right to speak, but I am speaking right now.
Yeah!
So,
2,000 people dead. 19,000 children are dead. You better call them. 19,000 children are dead. You won't call them dead.
so listen, what he's talking about, it's real. And so That's not the subject that I came to discuss today, but it's real, and I respect his voice.
It's not real. There is no genocide. That was the dumbest comment she made. I say to friends of Israel, Jewish and non-Jewish, you cannot vote for Kamala Harris if you really do take your support for Israel seriously, because she will be anti-Israel from day one. It will make Barack Obama appear to be Harry Truman, who recognized the state of Israel in 1948 along and instructed the UN representative to vote for the establishment of the state of Israel following the disestablishment of the British mandate in mandatory Palestine. And it's nothing that she knows anything about, nor has she deigned to get involved. She's out of the San Francisco, Oakland blue bubble, and Montreal and Washington, D.C., back to the blue bubble and back to the blue bubble. She's just never had a conversation with a real Israeli, to my knowledge, in my life. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is stealing Sunday. I thought the NFL owned Sunday. In fact, Donald Trump owns Sunday. Here he is at the Festerville Trevose. I think I'm saying that right. I have not been there. Pennsylvania, McDonald's, cut number 9. Here he is learning how to make French fries.
We gotta hit that timer, bring that one up. I'm gonna take care of these. Okay.
It's amazing. The President of the United States is now the future and former President of the United States working at Mickey D's. I hope the people in line, I hope they didn't act like I did when I sat next to Reggie Jackson on an airplane for 3 hours. I didn't ask him for an autograph. I didn't take a picture. I just talked baseball with him. I hope someone had the sense to say, Mr. President, dump those fries out, and can you sign it for me, please? Here's Donald Trump, of course, serving his first batch of fries, cut number 10.
Touched by a human hand. Nice and clean. Of course, my hands are nice and clean.
So he's got the fry machine down. Cut number 11, he goes over to the window. He's going to work the drive-through, and it's honest to goodness. Keep playing it.
Thank you. Have a good time. Thank you. It's cute. This is fun. I could do this all day. I wouldn't mind this.
There are like a million press people there, but the people in the car don't know that they're coming up and they're going to be dealing with the folks in the drive-through. Cut number 12, Donald Trump again at the drive-through.
I could do this all day. I wouldn't mind this job. I like this job. I think I might come back and do it again. Thank you. Look at that. Look at that. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. President. You made it possible for ordinary people like us to meet you.
You're not ordinary.
I mean, thank you so much
You
for
are not
everything
ordinary.
you're doing.
I can see.
We pray for you, and you are the type of person we want to be the president. Thank you so much.
You know, McDonald's in Pennsylvania got a very diverse crowd. Next, we have our Brazilian car coming through. Cut number 13.
A lot of fun here, everybody.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Look at all the fake news of it. Hello, everybody.
You can fake this,
And
right?
you know this is compliments of Trump, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
please don't let the United States become Brazil, my native Brazil.
We'll keep
Please,
it good.
Please, please.
We're going to make it better than ever, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Mr. President.
Compliments of Trump.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you over there.
My favorite reaction. Please don't let the United States become Brazil. Brazil's not a bad place. I like Brazil. I've been to Brazil. I've been in the favelas of Brazil on an NGO tour and a little with the fetching Mrs. Hewitt. It's not a bad place. The trouble with Brazil is it's anarchic and it's run by a socialist Lulu who's driving it into the ground. Cut number 14. Donald Trump at McDonald's. One more.
You believe this? Look at this guy. He's a MAGA guy all the way.
Okay, so for his first order, yup.
Well, that's a good-looking group. Hello, everybody. This is not a normal situation, is it, huh? How are you? What a good-looking family. How did you produce those good-looking kids? Oh, they look like the wife. They look like the wife. How are you? Nice to see you. That's great. Thank you, man. Thank you very much. Thank you. And there'll be no charge. Trump is paying for it. Is that okay? Oh, you're going to some extra stuff.
Oh, okay, great.
This is all on Trump.
Oh, hold on, Trump.
I'm allowed to do that, right?
Yeah.
Huh?
Let's check and make sure it's
Okay.
everything you said it would
It
be.
better be. It's going to be the best you ever. I made it myself.
You're the man. Make America great.
That's their order. Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you.
Pro tip, America, and all future campaigns. and to every fast food giant in the country. Try and get the former and future president of the United States to work your drive-through window. Because I don't know about you, all I wanted to do this morning until I got lost coming to the Salem News Channel studios was get to a Mickey D's and have an Egg McMuffin. You go get one, America. You deserve a break today. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt at the Salem News Channel studios inside the Beltway. Not at the Hugh Hewitt studio inside the Beltway. It had gone malfunction this morning. So, of course, I got lost trying to find the Salem News Channel this morning, but I made it in plenty of time. But that's a scar. That's a scarring thing. To see former President Trump at the Steelers game and with all the Yinzers shouting USA and applauding him, I think he's going to do okay in Pennsylvania. I think the Democrats may be close to throwing in the towel, though I'm not. All right. Here is Yasim Vosagian on MSNBC with a focus group in Michigan, cut number 2.
Who's voting for Kamala Harris here? Absolutely no.
No. Not possible.
There's nothing she can do or say for us to change our mind.
Nothing. Wow, that's a tough crowd. Ouch. All right, let me do the market report brought to you by our friends at AmericanFederal.com. AmFed, gold, coin, and bullion, the very best. And I'm checking every minute here. I began posting this morning by referencing news items. And you know I read news items by John Ellis every morning, as do about 30,000 of the smartest people in America. It's a subscription, so some people don't buy it, but I want all the news from everywhere. And the first item is, quote, gold reached a record earlier today with safe haven demand continuing to support prices as traders monitored escalating tensions in the Middle East and the increasingly tight U.S. election race. Bullion climbed as high as 0.3% to an all-time high of $2,729.30 an ounce, topping last week's peak by a few dollars. I'm just here to tell you that was done an hour and a half ago. So, of course, since that time, gold is now at $2,746 an ounce. And I guess they figure Israel is serious about wiping out everyone who tries to kill Israelis. And they're going to do it. And that might lead to a regional war. So as a result, gold is going up, up, up. So I would like you to call 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. Whether you're going to buy some gold now because you think the world's going to go to hell, because you're afraid Kamala Harris is going to win, in which case the world is going to go to hell, or you're afraid that the Iranians are theocratic fanatics and they're going to set off a war that's going to end up with Tehran a big pile of rubble. Not Beirut. No, Tehran, because the Israelis have had it. Hezbollah tried to knock off the prime minister and his wife by hitting his private residence, and they hit the residence, and Bibi came out and said, okay, gloves are off, Hezbollah. And they bombed every bank that Hezbollah operates, which are all located on the ground floor of apartment buildings. So there are a lot of homeless Lebanese this morning who are innocents, but there is no way to fight a war like this with an enemy like Hezbollah. So go to American Federal. If you're feeling a little insecure, get diversified, 800-221-7694. A lot of people to buy gold from. You'll hear from a lot of people in the course of a day of watching Fox News or listening to Salem News Channel or watching Newsmax or News Nation or listening to any other program on Sirius FM. You'll hear a gold ad. I trust Nick Grovich. I know him. All they do is buy and sell gold, and they add a commission either way, or they subtract the commission. It's safe. It's secure. It's the people you want to deal with because they're not selling you anything except gold or buying your gold. 800-221-7694. Okay, in my haste this morning, I forgot to bring my relief factor. So I cannot take relief factor on the air today. I feel great. Drove 10 hours on Saturday, beautiful day, left Maine, where a lot of the leaves are gone, and followed the leaves south. It's the greatest day in the world to drive from Maine to the Beltway. Vic Mattis, good morning, co-host of Getting Hammered, Washington Free Beacon, weekend editor. How are you, Vic?
I'm doing great, Hugh. I didn't realize you were so close to me.
I am. I want to ask you, if I tell you that I've been on Spout Run this morning, That's why I played Hello Darkness, My Old Friend. Why do you think I was on Spout Run this morning?
Let's see here. Well, you were traveling to the office, and that is the connection from GW Parkway into where you are at Sinclair.
No, it's actually the turnaround place when you miss the exit that you are supposed to get off, because Roslyn was designed by the same people who designed downtown St. Paul. I hate Roslyn. Do you like Roslyn?
Yeah, you know what? I remember Roslyn from the early 1990s when I went to school just over the river at Georgetown. And it's a whole new place now. Compared to what it once was, Hugh, it's like Metropolis, really, for me.
It is such a nightmare of streets. And in the dark at 4:45 in the morning, I've got coffee. I'm trying to use the GPS because I come here like twice a year. Because, of course, Xfinity decided today was the day to do maintenance on the Hugh Hewitt studio area. Vic, let's not digress. I feel like Donald Trump won not just the election, but the hearts and minds of millions of people who have actually worked at McDonald's yesterday. What do you think?
He keeps on getting all these great favors from the Harris campaign, and the latest one is that she had claimed only recently that she worked at a McDonald's. First, she says that she did it to put herself through school. Then they changed their message to say, actually, just earn a few extra bucks. And then our Joe Simonson and Andrew Kerr at the Washington Free Beacon published a story that could find no documentation and found her biographer who said, I never heard of that before. And therefore, it gave Trump this opportunity. And again, Harris had plenty of time to go back to Alameda. Now, remember, it wasn't Oakland. It was in Alameda across the way to say, oh, here's the McDonald's where I worked. They didn't push back against us. They didn't push back against the story, and they didn't take advantage. So, of course, Trump does it. And that puts him in that pole position. He's really trending in the, all his numbers are trending in the right direction, and he's peaking at the right moment. And this really was the greatest political stunt, I think, of this election cycle.
I have to agree. Now, Vic, I'm going to do this. I've done it before, but I want to see if you can match me. I'm going to give you a second to do it. Between my junior and senior year in high school, I worked at Terrace North Apartments doing maintenance. After high school was done, before college, I worked as a lifeguard at Niles Waddell Park Pool. The next 2 summers during college, I went back to Terrace North as a much, much esteemed lifeguard with nobody in that apartment pool, but the law required there be a lifeguard. Greatest job ever. And Molly McGuire, if you're listening, it was a great summer. And finally, I went back to Warren's Packard Park Pool to run the Packard Park Pool in my 4th. So I know every summer job I had. I can give you the location. Do you know every summer job you had in high school and college?
Yes, I do, because the first few years in my high school, I did the nerd camp at Lawrenceville, the New Jersey Scholars Program. So that is not a job. I worked at Hallmark, the G&G Hallmark in Thomas River, New Jersey.
Stop a minute.
Card business.
You worked at a Hallmark store?
I did, and I even put together the shelving units for Christmas because they put them together in August.
Do you speak in Hallmarkese? Like those little sayings they have in all their greeting cards?
I have to tell you, Hugh, there's nothing that irked me more than people who do not return their cards in the same place where they found them, and it turns into a memory match game where you have to remember where everything went. And then the other hard part was, of course, those darn Mylar balloons, because got to have a party with it, and that was my job. And then when I went to college, I did mostly internships. But that's
Vic, what were the stores on the immediate left and right of your Hallmark store, assuming it was in a mall somewhere?
Question. Yeah, it's a strip mall in New Jersey. I have no idea what the store to the left of me was. The store to the right of me was a great Italian restaurant. And so I would go.
Joy.
Joy. Yeah, red sauce.
Joy comes in the morning. Sandwich. That's what Kamala Harris says. Joy comes to me with a strip mall Italian restaurant. All right, Vic, I do not want to get ahead of myself, but it does feel like the bottom has fallen off of the Team Harris boat and that they're taking on water. Tim Walz, let me play for you. Poor Tim Walz, cut number 5 in Durham, North Carolina yesterday.
Look, I know many people of you say I'm tired of this. Trust me, I am too. We're fatigued. We're fatigued from it.
All right. I feel bad. He's in a church. I guess the United States Constitution is crumbling because the separation of church and state and Christian nationalism is on the rise. I didn't know that Tim Walz would be the face of Christian nationalism. Did you, Vic?
No, but the mood of that speech, just that clip, was downright funereal. And no, I don't envy him either. Yeah.
Now, going back to Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, Tim Walz. All the Trump is out there serving up flies. Let's play Vic. This kills me, Vic, to play for you, by the way. This kills me because I am not a Steelers fan. I hate the Steelers. And Trump goes to a Steelers game yesterday, cut number 17. How do you think he's doing in Pennsylvania, Vic?
It's that's impressive, and you do this. You know, it's like this groundswell. I saw another clip of the former Steelers player Antonio Brown handing out the Trump Vance, towels and all sorts of goodies and swag. This is a real problem for the Harris campaign because I mean they can tell their story and they have the media on their side, and despite that, you look at this feeling. It is hard to make the argument if you're the Harris campaign that he represents what is the current status quo and that she represents change. They clearly want to go back to the years between 2017 and 2021 when they think about all the pocketbook issues, and they're tired of this. So they're at a serious disadvantage here, and there is now, 15 days left until election. So again, momentum. He's peaking at the right time.
Election for me is in about 3 hours, because after I get home from the Salem News Channel studios this morning, I will don my walking attire and trundle over to the early voting site and cast my ballot for Trump Vance. And Senator Vance is coming on a little bit later today. By the way, do you think Senator Vance ever heard of Shane Gillis?
I hope so. He's a really funny guy. He's Midwestern, obviously, but he's a Notre Dame guy, and JD Vance is Ohio State, so maybe they won't get along. But he's great stuff, and I love his material.
I'm going to play him a little bit of Shane Gillis, cut number 21, for Vic Mattis to preview what's coming when my JD Vance interview comes up later in the third hour. Cut number 21.
I miss it. I miss the Trump speeches. For real, though, it was my favorite speech I've ever seen a president give. It was the night the United States killed the leader of ISIS. Trump comes out of the Situation Room at like midnight in the White House, and he walks down that fucking tunnel and gives a press conference like he's giving a post-game NBA just killed a guy press conference. He walks up in front of the entire world at midnight and just goes, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. He died like a dog. And it's I didn't change one word of that. That's what he opened with. And then he did 40 minutes. The speech is 40 minutes for no reason. It wasn't.
So what do you think, Vic? Is that good or is that going to surprise the future vice president?
Oh, he's going to love that. He's going to love it. And Shane Gillis does terrific impressions. I mean, they finally brought him back. He had this terrible break with Saturday Night Live where he was almost a cast member, and then he got canceled. And then they ended up bringing him back as a guest host, and he was hilarious. And he gave a very, very heartfelt monologue. It was both funny and heartfelt, talking about his family members with Down syndrome. It was quite something and especially for that kind of a crowd, because it allowed him to make jokes while at the same time saying, hey, these people are great. I think, what did he say about his sibling with Down syndrome? Not worried at all about the election. They're happy people.
Yep.
And I mean, it was quite something. So again,
Vic, I want to get to the latest edition of Getting Hammered, because I want to hammer you guys. You graded on a curve. You graded Kamala Harris on a curve. You were very, very generous to her in the because I drove 10 hours with my wife on Saturday from Maine back, and you and Mary Catherine were very, very generous. She tried to stiff Brett, Mary Catherine explained that, I thought, elegantly for the audience. There's some technical things here. She tried to stiff Brett. Brett was polite throughout, and he opened with a fact-based question which she could have answered easily, right? Like, we're not really sure, but it's at least 10 million people. And then she could have gone from there. Why were you guys grading on the curve for Kamala?
Well, I can't speak for my lovely co-host Mary Catherine, but I'll tell you for myself, it was so bad and cringeworthy. I almost felt bad for her, and I said, if I were Brett and I didn't realize the time constraints until I learned about that later, I would have taken a little more pity and let her finish, just let her ramble, and then ask the next question. It's like, how long is this going to go on for? And I understand the people that were her handlers were standing behind Brett, giving the cue to please end this interview now and end the suffering. I mean, it was brutal. I don't know whose idea it was for her to do this.
I got to tell you, I have a hard out with JD today. I mean, a very hard out. They have another interview lined up. And so when they talked to my booking producer yesterday, they said, we're not kidding. We're not joking. This isn't President Trump who calls up Hugh and just goes as long as he wants. This is a hard out. We want Hugh to understand hard out. And when you have a hard out, you have to respect that, right? That's just the deal. And she wanted to filibuster. Nothing makes me crazier than that. I've been doing this. I've probably done 35,000 interviews, not counting callers, since 1990. I only get angry when people filibuster. What is it about it that people can't say, I don't know, or I don't want to answer that question? Why is she so bad at this, Vic?
Because she's always been bad at this, Hugh. She has this inability to answer these direct questions. She's always evading responsibility, and so I mean, there's a dangerous level of vacuousness in this candidate. You could have had Elizabeth Warren up there. You could have had Amy Klobuchar up there. They would have said things that would have driven you nuts, but they would have been answers.
Oh, Donald Trump would be in trouble if he was up against. It would be so close I'd be losing sleep, because we really cannot have 4 more years of a Biden administration, not with the world on fire. We can't listen to her for 4 years. We can listen to and sometimes be angry with. I was listening to Megyn Kelly again, 10-hour car ride on Saturday, and we alternate driving. And so when I'm driving, I'm paying attention. When I'm not driving, I'm listening to podcasts. If I'm not talking to the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, and I listened to Megyn Kelly disaggregate the Kamala Harris meltdown on media. And the bottom line, we can't listen to this. We can't. It'll destroy the country. She is vapid. There is nothing there. There isn't a thought. It is like, I don't know what happened to her. I genuinely thought she was a political talent. I said as much. I did a panel with Van Jones in Central Park in 2017. I said, well, I think the Attorney General in California, before she was a senator, said, I think she's a pretty good candidate. I was wrong. She is so absolutely empty of ideas and experience that is a crisis for the world if she wins. And I believe Americans of all races, both sexes, every age demo is going to end up voting for Donald Trump because they realize he's 4 years of a roller coaster and he'll make you mad some days, but most days he will always have America first on his agenda, and most days he'll do what you like. But she, wow, what a sinking. It's sort of like watching Carter in real time in 1980. We didn't know it was happening because it happened over the weekend. Hugh Hewitt in the Salem News Channel studios in Virginia, where I am because of technical difficulties in my home studio, but I will address those a little bit later today. Akash Chagoli joins me now. He is the Vice President of Americans for Prosperity. Akash, and a side note for we Beltway people, when I say to you spout run, what do you think happened?
When you say what?
Spout run.
Ooh, I don't know. That's a Virginia reference, Hugh? You tell me.
Yes, it is. It's a reference to the exit one takes when you miss the Roslyn exit on the George Washington Parkway. That's where I have been turning around since 1983. I have been absolutely, Spout Run and I are old friends. Akash, I want to begin with the polls. The IDB tip poll came out yesterday, the tracking poll, national poll. Donald Trump, 49%, Kamala Harris, 47%. I'm a little afraid of getting irrationally exuberant here because I want Donald Trump to win. But what do you think of the polling and specifically that number?
I think it's exactly what we expected all along. Even when President Biden was the nominee, and more so when Kamala Harris became the nominee, this was going to be a toss-up going into election day. Now, Hugh, you and I have talked about how these national polls end up being largely meaningless. This election is going to come down to 7 key swing states, just like the Senate is going to come down to a handful of key swing states, and they are going to be toss-up races. That old cliche about turning out your voters is ultimately what's going to make this election a win or a loss for either side. I think that's more true this time around than it's been maybe in my lifetime, right? Where it is the ground game, knocking doors, making phone calls, turning out your voters, moving that tiny portion of swing voters that's going to determine this. So I think any level of exuberance or confidence at this point might be misplaced in favor of just focus here in the last couple of weeks.
So, Akash, yesterday we had over for dinner my son's father-in-law and mother-in-law and in-laws. And my son's mother-in-law voted early in North Carolina in a very long line that was all pro-Trump in Winston-Salem. I am curious, what are you finding out in your early GOTV efforts about who is turning out?
Yeah, so we're mostly focused on moving those last few voters, Hugh, the kind of undecideds, the middle, the low propensity, right-leaning voters, things like that. So it's less GOTV, but I think what we have heard over and over and over again is we've knocked 17 million doors this year, Hugh. And that's in races up and down the ballot, the Senate, the House, down ballot, state level races. But the same issues keep on resonating, which are the economy, inflation, and the border crisis. Those issues are dominating the discourse in the grassroots and among swing voters. I think that should bode well for Republicans. But again, as you and I have talked about, a lot of it comes down to the candidates' level of focus on those issues and the message that they're delivering about who and what is to blame and what the path is going forward. As we've discussed many times, it's big government policies, overspending, overregulation that's to blame for inflation, the border crisis. Obviously, this administration is to blame, but a path forward of controlling spending, keeping the tax cuts, getting the border out of, under control. If Republicans are talking about those issues in the last 2 weeks, they should hopefully be in good shape going into November.
Now, Akash, this morning the Washington Post has a story I want to read to you. The headline is, "Housing costs are rising everywhere, but especially in the swing states." Quote, "America's housing affordability crisis is weighing heavily on the nation's most sought-after voters in places like Wilmington, North Carolina, where home prices have risen 65% since 2019. Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. In those 3 states, more than 80% of the voters live in counties where housing costs surged faster than the national average, which was pretty doggone high between August 2019 and 2024, the Post found. Many swing states, particularly along the Sun Belt, experienced an influx of new residents during the pandemic, driving up demand for housing. At the same time, COVID-related challenges made it difficult to keep up with new construction. The burst of demand combined with constrained supply led to a rapid run-up in prices." Well, we should also mention about spending $7 trillion that put an incredible amount of demand, fluid demand, marginal demand on the market as well. But genuinely, a housing crisis in the swing states. Is that helping Trump?
I think it's hard to know. It's certainly adding to people's angst about inflation and cost of living. I think one of the things that article may have pointed out, or other analysts mentioned, is that housing isn't always mentioned as frequently as gas and groceries are mentioned. Those are obviously weekly expenses people are taking on versus housing is maybe a one-time thing or a monthly thing when it comes to rent. But I think it just adds the narrative that life has become unaffordable for the middle class, for young people, for millennials. But I think 2 other things I would mention there, Hugh, that are to blame for increased housing costs, especially in these states. One is tariffs, right? Importing raw materials that it takes to build houses has become more expensive through the last 10 years, which the Biden administration obviously kept in place. The other is the demand, because people are moving to those states, right? Why are people moving to Arizona, Texas, Florida, North Carolina? Because they have the environment that conservatives have put in place of low taxes, low regulation, their right to work states. People are flocking to these states, young people, working people, young families. Of course, that's going to drive up demand. But of course, I don't expect the Washington Post to make that point, that people are fleeing Massachusetts, New York, Illinois, and California for these states because of the policy environment that exists in these red Sunbelt states.
So, Akash, I'm curious. I've told everyone repeatedly about AmericansForProsperity.org/volunteer. That's americansforprosperity.org/volunteers. We have 2 weeks to go. They can still use your help. Has that worked? Have new people come forward to say, I want to get involved in my community and I want to work for a not-for-profit that has a long history of effectively turning out the vote?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What we're seeing a lot of this year, people who would know us, they've known us for a long time. If you go back to, the Act 10 labor days in Wisconsin or the tax fights in North Carolina, we've been active in Florida for a long time, is people who have known us and trust us are coming back into the fold because they know that we give them the tools and the capability and the geo-targeting, the data targeting, to make a difference with a limited amount of time that they have in their day, right? People aren't all doing what you and I do here, where we talk about this stuff and work on it full time. They've got families and jobs and things like that. And so we're giving them a chance with a limited amount of time to make a difference for the conservative movement. And so we've seen a lot of urgency, a lot of activity. And we do believe, based on the data that we see, it is making a difference, really across the country in the states and communities that we're focusing on.
How do you feel the Senate looks right now? Because I do believe it's a lock that the Republicans are going to take the Senate. It's just a question of the margin. I'd like Dave McCormick and Bernie Moreno and Larry Hogan to win. I know that Tim Shea is going to win in Montana and Jim Justice in West Virginia, but I'd like Kerry Lake to win. I think Nella Domenici has a shot in New Mexico. I think Sam Brown has a shot in Nevada. There are others like Hung Kao in Virginia. What do you think, Akash?
Yeah, I think you're basically right. Republicans are in a good position to take the majority, but the size of that majority does matter to you. And you mentioned Sam Brown, Dave McCormick, Bernie Moreno, Larry Hogan. These are great candidates who deserve to win. They're in tough races, but here's why that margin ultimately matters. If they're to extend the Trump tax cuts or build on them, as you know, that only takes a simple majority in the Senate, 50 votes. We'd much rather be in a position where we have 52, 53 votes. We're not just relying on what Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski will let get through the Senate. If we have a vote margin of 2, 3, even 4 vote majority in the Senate, that allows full Republican control to pass a much more conservative tax and reconciliation package that would obviously get through a Republican House, get signed by a Republican president. But the size of that Senate majority will make a big difference on how conservative the governance is in a full Republican control scenario. And that, as you mentioned, is something that activists and volunteers can help determine here in the next couple of weeks with AFP.
Akash, last question. Again, americansforprosperity.org/volunteer to get involved. Always the Republicans win and they sit around and do nothing for 3 months, sometimes 4 months, sometimes 5 months, because they're listening to everyone argue about what ought to be in the budget. That is such a waste of time. I mean, they ought to have a budget done and ready to pass in the first week and reconciliation follow-on bills to pass in weeks 2 and 3. Do you think they will get out of the blocks fast?
I do, and the reason I know that is because we have been directly involved in those conversations. Speaker Johnson, Majority Leader Scalise, the committees, they've been active, honestly, for months, Hugh, preparing for this exact scenario. We can't be in the situation we were in 2017, where healthcare kind of fell on our heads. They fumbled it for a while and then turned their attention to tax. And so Republican leadership has been very, very hands-on. And you mentioned the process exactly like that. They have to agree on a budget, pass that budget with instructions for the various committees and what have you, and then take the process from there. They have been not only involved in that conversation, but talking to the Senate, preparing for the various scenarios of the size of the majorities in the House and Senate. And so, yes, I expect there to be much better preparation and much better, faster activity in the first 100 days from a full Republican-controlled Congress. Again, we have to get there.
New York Times is slamming Donald Trump for accusing Kamala Harris of making up her McDonald's experience. As Mark Thiessen, my colleague at the Washington Post, points out, the burden of proof is on Kamala Harris. Just give us an address. Give us a couple of details. Stephanie Ruhle said, I just want to know, just yes or no, did you work there? And she said, yes. Maybe she did. If she can't remember, that's unusual. I made Harley do a terrible thing. I made him go back, because McDonald's, of course, has been around forever, and to the late, great Al Cavelli, good friend of my family, good friend of mine. Great bag job, by the way. He was a great person to carry a golf bag for. Al was a good tipper. But Al owned a bunch of McDonald's, and his son Sammy did then as well, and then Sam flipped him over and became a Panera owner. And they've been great citizens of northeastern Ohio, wonderful residents of Warren, the first family of Warren, really, the Cavellis. And Joe and Al started with nothing, and they bought a McDonald's franchise, and they got going. So when I was growing up, McDonald's had a different kind of ad than they have today, and I made Harley go and find a 1972 McDonald's ad so you can hear and watch, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, what it was like when McDonald's was looking for your business in 1972. Hit it.
Tell me what does it mean? At McDonald's it's clean. You deserve a break today. So get up and get away to McDonald's, McDonald's, McDonald's.
All right, so that is a 1971 copyright, and I think that's within fair use given the fact that Donald Trump owns the media cycle. I mean, it may go on for, as Guy Benson posted on X, the memes are fabulous. It was a genius move. And then go into the Steelers game, all right? He went into Yinzer, the heart of Yinzerdom, and he showed up, and this is the result at cut 17. Play the audio. Now, I ask you to consider this. When else do you hear people chanting USA? USA. Typically, it's when the Olympics are in the United States and an American has won gold. It is, in my mind, indelibly connected with the Lake Placid hockey victory and the greatest sports movie ever made about that, starring Kurt Russell. And so I'm here to tell you, when you get 80,000 Yinzers chanting USA, I think you're doing okay in Pennsylvania. And I think maybe elite media is more than a little bit shocked. Maybe befuddled is the right word, maybe not shocked, but befuddled, maybe completely confused at the Donald Trump's appeal. They don't get it. But the average American voter believes he will keep them safe and he will keep the country good. And whatever he does that annoys them, and everybody is annoyed by something, even in their most favorite of presidents. I remember, look, I worked for William French Smith. My first job in the federal government was for Bill Smith, who was a great attorney general, the federal government executive branch. I worked for a couple of judges on the DC circuit years ago, but I went to work for the attorney general, and I was annoyed by the fact he could not tell a joke. So I was the special assistant in charge of Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrants, but I also reviewed speeches written mostly by my friend Terry Eastland, the late great Terry Eastland, and we just gave up. He couldn't tell a joke. So I'm annoyed by that. Could not tell a joke. Used the same joke about Oliver Wendell Holmes riding on a train like 100,000 times. That doesn't matter. What matters is who will keep America safe and good. Donald Trump will.
Grab a bucket and mop. Scrub the bottom and top. There is nothing so clean as my burger machine. With a broom and a brush, clean it up for the rush. Before you open the door, or to shine on the floor. When we finish one then, start all over again. Tell me, what does it mean? At McDonald's it's clean. You deserve a break today. So get up and get away to McDonald's.
Good morning, America. That is the second best commercial McDonald's ever made. The best commercial was yesterday when former and future President Donald Trump worked the window in Pennsylvania. Joining me to discuss this and other topics, Michael Duncan, one of the co-hosts of the Ruthless podcast. Duncan, good morning. You're not even old enough to remember that jingle, are you?
No, I guess not. But they say I'm an old soul, you know? I'm the old man of the variety program.
Duncan, tell me what your background is. I know the other guys a little bit, but were you part of the McConnellist gang of four as well?
Yeah, I got hired in the 2014 campaign as the digital consultant on the race. So that's how I got to know Josh and John. Josh was leading the effort, and Ashbrook was the communications expert. And then sort of after the 2014 cycle, I went over to Israel and I was a consultant on Netanyahu's 2015 campaign. That was the snap election. And Josh and John, sort of called me up and were like, "Hey, we're thinking about, starting this new company. Would you be interested?" And I was, and that will be, a decade now in March since we started Cavalry, our consulting firm. And yeah, I mean, we did McConnell's 2020 election, a host of other things. And yeah, I mean, started Ruthless now, I guess 4 years ago.
Ruthless is the most influential conservative podcast in America. And I listen to it religiously, and I'm trying to hit for the cycle. You're the double, by the way, Michael Duncan. Holmes is the leadoff hitter. He was the single. And the homer literally is Ashbrook because he's from Ohio. So you're the double. Of course, the triple and the hardest thing to get when you hit for the cycle is Smug. And so I'm working hard on that. What did Smug ever work for McConnell?
No. I mean, we basically met Smug the way everyone meets Smug, through Twitter.
I've never met Smug, so it'll be an interesting conversation. So, Michael, I want to know, first of all, do you guys have a plan for Ruthless? My plan is to get you on HBO before or after Mars so they can see what a real show would bring in terms of ratings. But what's your plan for Ruthless podcast?
We really didn't have a plan. And I think that's probably the key to its success is, we started this thing during the pandemic, when DC was shut down and we were basically forced in our homes. And we used to just get together for a happy hour Zoom at the end of the day. So we just talk about what we were doing, drink a little bit of bourbon. And after a while, we just sort of like, this would be a good podcast. And so that's why we started it. And I mean, honestly, it's just that sort of chemistry amongst friends that I think is what makes, Ruthless work. Would I like to do more with it? Absolutely. I feel like conservatives, Republicans, people on the right don't invest enough time in media. We spend billions of dollars in think tanks and super PACs, and the left gets this. They understand this. They understand that politics is downstream of culture, and to influence the culture, you got to produce content that people actually want to consume. And that's what you do every day.
When the late, great Andrew Breitbart hit the scene, Andrew had the recipe, but he died. Yeah. Andrew is a friend of mine. He's a friend of Larry O'Connor's. He introduced me to Larry. Andrew came down to the studio. We talked on the day he passed away. He was on the program. And that gap was not filled until I think you guys came along, because you realize, maybe Ben Shapiro as well, infotainment is what Rush and I have been doing for 30 years, and Mark Levin, and Mike Gallagher. I mean, Rush built the mall. We just have stores in it. You guys are building the new mall, or whatever it is that is the replace the mall, which is the Ruthless podcast. And it's fun. You have to have fun. Now, you are an R-rated show, and I want people to know that before you turn it on, because you will let fly, as every consultant I've ever known, with the occasional invective that is not appropriate for the PG-13 audience in the car driving to school and work this morning. But tell me, what is the amount of scripting that goes into an average, not the JD Vance. Senator Vance is coming up on my show next hour for a straightforward commentary on the Ruthless podcast fishing expedition. But what is actually the prep that goes into a show for Ruthless?
First of all, Hugh, you complimenting the show is kind of surreal. It's sort of like Peyton Manning complimenting your spiral. But very little prep. We do this for a living. So we'll do about a 15-minute production meeting around, noon or 1 o'clock most days that we record. And then we just get in front of the camera and record, and very little post-production editing, really. I mean, because this is what we do every day, And I mean, that was part of the motivation for starting Ruthless was, after a while you get kind of sick and tired of hearing from all these people talk about the business you do every single day and not having a microphone in front of your face, And I think that's sort of our value proposition to the listener and the viewer is, we can give you some of that inside baseball because this is what we do every day. We try to win elections.
I love King of the Hill more than anything else. Michael. I love King of the Hill because I have sat through 10,000 green room conversations and on-set interviews through my 4 long years at MSNBC and NBC with people who don't know anything about how elections work. Nothing. And I have not actually been an operative since 1976 when I ran the youth campaign for Ford in Massachusetts, which wasn't exactly high up on the rung. I don't really run campaigns, I do media, but I know when people are just stupid. Did you get angry listening to just stupid takes on TV? Was that part of the motivation?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, look, there's a reason why when you watch football commentary, for example, I mean, they've got a color commentator who can help make the game entertaining, but there's somebody who played the game. There's like a Kirk Herbstreit or somebody like that, somebody who was a quarterback.
Herbie
somebody,
is the best.
Yeah. And so, like having the perspective of somebody who played the game informs, the viewer, the listener of like what's actually happening. And, so much of politics has become people, prognosticating or pontificating without the context of how elections are run and how political campaigns should work.
This is why I like having Coach Urban Meyer on. Urban's a friend, and he comes on when there's an issue in college sports that we want to talk about, like NIL. And it's better to actually talk to someone who's coached a football team than to talk to an agent. They're different. It's better to talk to someone. It just is. So let's get to the heart of the question this morning, Michael. I sense irrational exuberance among Republicans. And after 2012, I'm never giving into it again because your old boss used to say, first thing you got to win. I mean, Leader McConnell said to me about a dozen times in the course of my life interviewing, first thing you got to win. Do you think Trump's going to win?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the polling averages at the national polling level, I mean, he's outperforming where he was in 2016 against Hillary Clinton and outperforming where he was in 2020 against Biden. And then you look at some of the swing state polls, which really are the only polls that matter right now. And, in some of these states, Kamala Harris hasn't had a lead for a month. So I have to feel good about all of that. That being said, what really gives me optimism isn't the polls, which are a theoretical proposition based on a turnout model that pollsters, create of what the electorate might look like. I'm more heartened by the hard data, that we're starting to get from absentee by mail and early voting. In 2020, Trump and a lot of Republicans sort of poo-pooed on early vote and absentee by mail and have embraced it this time, which is obviously to our benefit, especially in states that have a history of absentee by mail and early voting, like Arizona comes to mind, or Nevada, where they're actually mailing out ballots. So accepting the rules of the game, even if you don't like them, and trying to maximize your chance of victory there, I think is ultimately going to make the difference for Republicans in a lot of these very, very close battleground states.
Now, I want to play for you Jim Messina. I like Jim. I've done some events with Jim over the years. I've worked with Paul Begala and Carville. I'm of that age. Jim Messina went on with MSNBC's Jen Psaki yesterday and said this about the late stage. And there's a lot in this 48-second clip I'm going to let you just riff on when you hear it. This is Jim Messina yesterday.
Time. I mean, if you think about, Jen, in politics, you have 3 things. You have time, you have money, and you have volunteers. And the one thing of those 3 you can't go get more of is time. And so there's really difficult decisions being made in Wilmington right now about what you do with her time, what you do with the surrogate's time. There's competing things. The press team wants her on these TV interviews. The fundraising team wants her to do one more big event in X city. The battleground states are saying we've got to have her 3 more times in Michigan. And so, making those decisions becomes the most important thing. It's why you see these campaign people on TV and they look absolutely exhausted because everyone is telling them they're a band of idiots and they should do it their way. And they have to make really, really difficult decisions.
Michael Duncan of the Ruthless podcast, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells you that she's starting to see the numbers that the Republicans have seen in some of these battleground states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan, that the blue wall is starting to show a lot of cracks. It's the reason why she was in Grand Rapids over the weekend, particularly outside of the major city DMAs. I'm thinking like Wayne County, outside of like Detroit DMA and places like that, the Democrats have seen a big attrition. I mean, Biden's path in 2020 was just doing a little bit better in all of the outer markets in these swing states, better than Hillary Clinton did in, say, Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, for example, or better in Macomb County in Michigan than Clinton did. And Kamala just doesn't have that juice. So in aggregate, all of these small rural counties in those blue wall states, can add up to a Donald Trump victory. And so, yeah, I mean, they need her in the swing states more. Money is not their problem.
Michael, if Team Harris walked in the door at Cavalry LLC, your consulting firm this morning, not onto the side of Ruthless, but and they brought in a big bag of gold, enough that you guys said, yeah, that's generational wealth. You went Steve Schmidt on us and Lincoln Project money. And they said, what do we do? What would your advice be to her right now?
It would be to distance from Joe Biden and find a wedge on the economy, on crime, and on the border that you could reasonably sell to swing state undecided voters. And she has been unable to formulate that. She can't articulate it in interviews. We haven't really seen it in ads, except for maybe the issue of immigration, where, you remember in July or August, her campaign put out a tough on border security ad. So I think ultimately the issue is because they stalled so long in trying to have her tell her own story, all of that tape from 2019 from the Democratic primary has defined her in millions and millions of dollars worth of ads. And so she's really missed that opportunity, but that would be my one piece of advice for her.
Okay, and if Donald Trump shows up, fresh from McDonald, still wearing his hat and his apron, and he says to the cavalry gang, how should I close? What do you tell him?
Close on the economy. It's the number one issue for undecided voters and the number one issue in all these battleground states. And then number two, I mean, I think his coalition is formulated, right? And he's doing the right thing by trying to go out there and make media opportunities every single day, because lower propensity voters, the bigger the turnout, I think benefits him. And then the final thing I would say is continue to reinforce early voting, absentee by mail. Banking votes makes the campaign more efficient ahead of Election Day.
Michael Duncan of Ruthless, thank you, my friend. Keep coming back. Tell Smug I need to hit for the cycle. I need my triple. He's the hardest one to get, so I'm going to get Smug.
Hugh, I will make sure he gets on the show. I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate everything you've done, help getting the word out about our show. You're just the best, man. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Time to decrease so others increase, especially Ruthless. I'll be right back, America. Stay with us. Bethany Mandel is the author of Stolen Youth. She joins me each week at this time. Good morning, Bethany. First, your reaction upon hearing that Sinwar had in fact been eliminated by the IDF.
It was incredible. I cried. It was a really beautiful moment that I hope I'm feeling a little less hopeful now on Monday than I was, when we found out, but I hope is the beginning of the end of the war. We'll see.
Okay, yesterday, Israel's Air Force took out every branch of Hezbollah's main bank, and they are going to keep it up because Hezbollah tried to kill Netanyahu and his wife. That is the difference between Sinwar being a terrorist and Netanyahu being the leader, democratically elected leader of a democratic country. How did you react to the attempt to kill Netanyahu and Sarah Netanyahu?
I don't think many people were surprised or that scared by it. He's, Sinwar was a rat and he was running from building to building. Netanyahu has the infrastructure of an entire army behind him, reinforced buildings. Hezbollah can't get him, and I think it was honestly a laughable attempt. That's the difference between these two armies that are facing off. One actually has the firepower and the ability to protect what is worthy of protection, prime minister, civilians, whereas the other are just terrorists.
All right, now you have absolutely no way of knowing, and I have no way of knowing. I do know that somebody leaked from the American government to Iran the Israeli plans for a hit on Iran. it's almost impossible to believe that. Who do you suspect? You suspect a GS5 or 4 somewhere in the Pentagon, or do you suspect someone on the National Security Council who just hates Israel?
Unfortunately, within the deep state, and this is something that President Trump needs to clean out a lot when he becomes president again in January, there are members of the deep state that are well-known haters of Israel, people who were founding members of Students for Justice in Palestine at Georgetown. There's unfortunately any number of culprits possible, suspects, because there are so many people who work within our security and defense and foreign relations apparatus who hate the state of Israel, who need to be gutted out.
Now, the 3 smart girls I talked to are you, Mary Catherine Ham, and my daughter. You're all the same age, you're all moms of 4 or more children, and you all have problems with Trump. And you've all told me about the problems with Trump. Do those pale now in comparison to the threat posed by Kamala Harris's vacuity?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Yesterday, I tweeted that I had a conversation at synagogue over this past week because it was a holiday. I had a conversation with a guy who said, as an American, I don't know how you vote for Trump. And as a Jew, I don't know how you vote for Kamala. And, he's not a fan of Trump. There's a lot of people that are not. But I tweeted that and I heard from 2 individuals who are very moderate. One of them I would consider liberal, and one of them lives in Israel now. And she said, I'm feeling this right now. I don't know how I can vote for Kamala knowing that someone within her administration would do something like this when it's a literal life and death situation for me living here in Israel. I don't think I can vote for her. And if you look at the polling numbers of how American Jews are saying they're planning on voting, she's getting the lowest number of Jews basically in modern American history voting for her.
Do you think more will stay home or more will go in and vote for Trump? Of the demographic that deserts among supporters of Israel, I always say it that way because it's not just Jewish Americans, people like me who are not Jewish, who believe that the only democratic state in the Middle East and our ally needs support. Do you suppose that the defectors will primarily stay home, or will they go and pull the lever for Trump? Because we really actually need them to do the latter.
Yeah. So I don't know is the answer. This individual, I would be surprised if she voted for Trump, but I've been surprised by a lot of things. And I think she now realizes she can't vote for Kamala, and she, doesn't feel like she can't not vote. So I think she might vote for Trump for the sake of her own safety and security. And, for lots of American Jews also who have friends and family living in Israel, they understand it's a question of their safety and security. It's a life and death question. It's not, it's not a policy issue anymore. It's life or death.
It's also an issue of anti-Semitism in the United States. And I really do not believe a Kamala Harris Department of Justice or Department of Education will do anything about the attacks on Jews on American campuses. You're closer to this than I am. Have they continued at the pace they were in the late spring on American campuses as colleges started up again?
Not yet, but I think, we saw under President Trump, he passed stuff long before there were issues on campuses. Title VI, Title IX, I don't remember which title. Things on campuses to ensure the safety of Jewish American students that, Kamala Harris, in comparison, when she was talking to a group of, well, she did 2 off the cuff moments. One of them was someone interrupted her rally, screaming about genocide, and she agreed with them. The person was removed, and she said, "Well, he has a point." And another individual screamed about Jesus is Lord, and she said, "You're at the wrong rally." Those 2 off the cuff moments were really, really telling when she finally got off the teleprompter who she is as a person. It's not good news.
Bethany, one of the things I'm going to ask JD Vance about today is COVID accountability. But before we go there, I want to play for you the moment that you referenced with the vice president at a rally in Milwaukee. It's in Madison, not Milwaukee. Cut number 6.
Right now, I know what you're speaking of. I want the ceasefire.
But what about the genocide?
I want the war to end.
What about the genocide?
And I respect your right to speak, but I am speaking right now.
Yeah!
So,
2,000 people dead. 19,000 children are dead. You better call them. 19,000 children are dead. You won't call them.
So, listen, what he's talking about, it's real. And so that's not the subject that I came to discuss today, but it's real, and I respect his voice.
It is not real. Did we lose Bethany?
No,
Bethany,
I'm
you
here.
still with me? Okay, what'd you
I'm
think
here.
of that?
It's real. What is real? Those numbers are absolutely figments of his fever dream imaginations. This is far from the first time that she has legitimized these blood libels against the Jewish state. It's obscene, and it honestly shows that she has such a lack of understanding about what has been happening. Ceasefire, ceasefire. Everyone keeps throwing around that phrase. She could have taken that moment to say, with the death of Sinwar, we do have an opportunity for the end of the war. Here's what needs to happen. Hamas needs to give up the rest of the hostages. They've been offered immunity to do so and a free ticket out of Gaza. There were so many things she could have said. Instead, she said, what he's talking about is real, and so far as talking about a genocide. It's absurd.
I'll close with this. If she had a staff, I don't know if she has a campaign staff. She didn't rehearse for Bret Baier. She wasn't ready for a simple question, how many people cross the border? And if she's not ready for the genocide challenge by now, and it's an absolute blood libel, as Bethany said, she's not ready to be president. Bethany Mandel, thank you for staying an extra couple minutes with me. I wanted your reaction to that. You have a great week, and I'll talk to you again next Monday.
Thanks.
Jim Garrity joins me. Jim, I hate Xfinity and Comcast with the passion that I usually reserve for the Steelers. What do you think?
Look, I was watching the video you were showing of Trump at the stadium last night, and Hugh, all I can say is I'm just glad that at least one winner from New York showed up in Pittsburgh last night, because a whole bunch of others did not. But
you
and
I are both trapped in football hell. You and I are both trapped in football hell. And we both have quarterbacks who are getting paid a gazillion dollars, and we just should cut our losses, right? Cut them both, suck it up, live under the cap, go get some rookies.
So the irony is, like, Rodgers took a pay cut to go to the Jets. So that's not actually the Jets' problem. The problem is that they stink. They stink. Like, Rodgers looks old, but that's not really the problem. No, it's like that we've done everything. There's a good meme going around last night where they talk about the Jets. They fired Saleh. They traded for Devontae Adams. They got Hassan Reddick back in. He's going to be suiting up next week. They did all the things, and the universe is like, I don't care. You still stink. No changes you make are going to make a darn bit of difference. But
the worst thing for a Browns fan, I woke up this morning to look over at Cleveland.com, and all of the great Browns players, from Myles Garrett down, are yelling at the fans for booing Watson. Now, it's bad to boo someone who's injured, but he's a bad quarterback. And I've seen Brian Sipe come in for Mike Phipps, who got booed off the field. I saw Mike Phipps come onto the field after Bill Nelson was booed off. That's what fans do when you're a loser.
Yeah, look, gargantuan contracts lead to gargantuan expectations. And I think there was some controversy in the NBA, and some young player talked about how traumatizing it was to be booed, and how much it hurt when the fans turned on you. And on the one hand, I feel really bad for guys. Like, that is really difficult. You get criticized for what you do. I get criticized for what I do. It's part. But the thing is that in the NBA or the NFL, like, what league minimum is close to $1 million now.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you get a pretty sweet life, and that's part of the
Terry
deal.
Pluto, who is the senior writer for Cleveland.com, always says, never feel bad for a multimillionaire who's playing a game. Jim, let's get to politics. The IBD tip poll, which is the best poll over the last 2 cycles, has on a national basis Donald Trump 2 points ahead of Kamala Harris. On a national basis, not swing state, just national. What do you think? I am afraid of irrational exuberance here on the part of Republicans.
I think you have good reason right now for rational exuberance. And that rational exuberance is that right now it feels like Trump is favored. We felt like the Democrats panicked. Like about a week and a half ago, I talked about how the Democrats' anxiety attack was starting, and it was starting to turn into panic. And then, like, it just accelerated in the last couple, like last week and a half. I think what I'm trying to sort out now is how much of this is he's genuine. Like, first of all, the tip poll looks great. The other national polls, you really have a hard time finding Harris ahead by more than like 2 points. And 2 points is probably not going to do it. And if it's less than 2 points, she's going to have a really tough time reaching 270 electoral votes. All those swing states all look like they're still within the margin of error. So I don't think you can say, oh, like maybe Trump. I think Trump generally has a better advantage in the Sun Belt states. I think she still has an advantage in that blue wall states. But boy, I wouldn't want to bet a lot of money on that. So you put all this together, and you just
I was
feel
on
like
set at NBC in 2016, and I just remember the shock, the absolute despair of 99 out of 100 people. I might have been the only person in the building who voted for Trump in 2016, and they just were in disbelief. I don't want to ever do that again, because I thought Romney was going to win in 2012. I felt real good about that. The American people decide, and sometimes they decide late, Jim Garrity.
Yeah, and I have a tough time believing this is that circumstance. You've seen the comedians joking, what else do you need to see? And look, Trump, everybody knows how they feel about Trump right now. There was a window for Harris to go out there and say, hey, I know you haven't been pleased with Joe Biden. I'm going to be different. Here's how I'm going to be different. And she really never quite answered that question. Now, in the last couple of weeks, I've heard this interesting argument that part of the deal to get Biden out was that Harris could not criticize her, which would explain, could not criticize him. And that if she did, Biden would turn on her and start, airing all the dirty laundry. And it does feel like we've seen some shots across the bow from Biden, emphasizing how great it's been to work with DeSantis and all that stuff. So I kind of wonder if she is trapped in an inability to really distance herself from Biden in a meaningful way, other than saying, well, I'm not Joe Biden, I'm younger, et cetera. Like what she's right now promising is the same policies with a younger and more pleasant face. And that's not enough to close the deal. Now, is she out of it? No. But I think the panic you talked about on election night 2016 feels like we're getting it now. I think a lot of Democrats thought she would have put it away by now, and that we'd start seeing leads of 4 points, 5 points, 6 points in these swing states. Like she's running 3 times as many ads. She's got 3 times as many campaign offices, 3 times as much, volunteers and door knock. Like on paper, she should be way ahead, and she's not. And as I said at a conference in Wisconsin last week, that old joke about how it's this huge advertising campaign to sell dog food, and the customer buys the other brand, and the guy in charge of the ad campaign is just befuddled, and he says to the customer, look, we changed the packaging, we have these great commercials, we have this great display here in the supermarket, why are you buying this other brand? And the guy points to his dog and says, because he won't eat it. At the end of it, the problem is not the sales pitch for Kamala Harris, the problem is the product. And America,
let me talk to you about another signal and get your, whether it's noise or signal, analysis. I left Maine on Saturday after being there for 5 months, and we watch Hulu because it's where Slow Horses is, and Only Murders in the Building. There's a Kamala Harris ad in Mid-Coast, Maine, every other ad on Hulu, which is bought by Geographic. They're obviously reaching, not for Maine's 2nd District, as Tom Rick suggested, because that's out of reach for them. They are reaching for New Hampshire, northern New Hampshire, because they're worried about New Hampshire, Jim. That's my only take on it. Is there an alternative analysis?
She's raised $1 billion. I think actually, when all is said and done, we're going to hear the catastrophic success expression, that the Harris campaign has money to spend for ads everywhere. So yeah, if you want to take a shot, and I think you're right. I think Maine's 2nd District is probably going to go for Trump, and probably not going to be all that close. But you got the money to run Hulu ads there. You got the money to run Hulu ads if you go across the border into New Hampshire. They can advertise everywhere they want. As I said, the problem is just that I don't know if those ads. First of all, it's an interesting question, but whether people actually make their decisions based on the presidential candidate, as opposed to say some candidate, down ticket candidate they don't know as much about. Do they change their mind on their presidential vote because of what they see in a campaign ad? And I have my doubts about that. But
let me close this way, Jim Garrity. Would you put a value on Trump's working the McDonald's fry machine and window yesterday? How do you value that? That's earned media. If you listen to Hacks on Tap, it is always Michael Murphy's mantra that earned media wins election. What's the value you put on that yesterday?
A great deal. And, I have my doubts that Harris is lying about working at McDonald's. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest that they can't find employment records. It was a long time ago. But the contrast, and by the way, could you see Kamala Harris working the fry cooker today? I have my doubts. I think people know it just wouldn't work. Whereas this looked and felt like a Saturday Night Live sketch. And apparently, like back on Oprah's show, they did one where he worked in one of his own hotels. And he talked about how hard the busboys work. And he was delivering room service and walking a dog for an old lady and stuff. Trump does this very well. The time he sang Green Acres, was it at the Oscars or one of those award shows? He's capable of laughing at himself. He's capable of making fun of himself. But he had this great exchange where somebody said, it's so nice for you to come here and spend time with ordinary people. And he says, there's nothing ordinary about you. Like that, turn that into an ad. That is just this great, like the more positive message of him. The other thing, as I'm watching these images, I think it was Tiffany Fong who had said, these are not artificial intelligence generated images. These are not deep fakes. This is reality. And I remember thinking, we have reached the moment where reality now looks like the things we are usually told are disinformation. It's kind of this bizarre,
and I just got to say, I don't know what Kamala Harris's ad budget is. Whatever it is, she got outspent this weekend because of that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So whether it
Nothing
was
she
Chris
can do
Lasavita or Susie Wiles or somebody else, they get the gold star.
Grab a bucket and mop. Scrub the bottom and top. There is nothing so clean as my burger machine. With a broom and a brush, clean it up for the rush. Before you open the door, or to shine on the floor. When we finish one then, start all over again. Tell me, what does it mean? At McDonald's it's clean. You deserve a break today. So get up and get away to McDonald's, McDonald's, McDonald's.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That's a 1972 ad for the Golden
71.
Arches.
71.
It was made in 71 and released in 72, I believe. But Generalissimo, give us the background on the people in that ad.
So there are 7 people or 7 guys that were in that group. 5 of them are actually recognizable actors. The African American gentleman that was in that is John Amos. Before he became the father in Good Times, the spinoff of All in the Family, he would also be a character actor in several movies. He was in The West Wing for years. He was in Die Hard 2. He's one of the villains in Die Hard 2, which was the takeover of Dulles Airport.
Okay, next.
Anson Williams, who was Potsy in Happy Days and sang quite often in episodes of Happy Days. Had a very much a good singing voice.
I didn't recognize him. I love Happy Day.
And
next.
Next one, the manager, the bald manager with the tie is John Wheeler, another character actor. And where I recognized him is from a movie in 71 with Jim Garner called Support Your Local Gunfighter.
No, that's right. I knew that guy.
And you remember the scene where he does the roulette wheel? And
yes.
And he plunks down $4,600 on 23, and the roulette wheel guy says, "Boss!" That was John Wheeler. And the boss comes out, takes a shot of whiskey, and says, "Spinner," and then he loses and passes out. So yeah, John Wheeler is the roulette wheel guy. So that's where I remembered him from. So there's a 4th guy in there named John Hamer. Now John Hamer was the guy that talked about the hamburger machine.
Why are we showing MASH clips? We got to wrap this up.
Because John Hamer was Sergeant Zale, a recurring character on MASH for years. The 5th is a guy named Robert Ridgely, who appeared in 4 movies by Mel Brooks, including Blazing Saddles, where he played Boris.
I got to tell Rhett Rasmussen right now.
Yeah.
BestHotGrill.com is our sponsor.
Yeah.
We are not going to forget Rhett, United States Naval Academy, 1982. Because Best Hot Grill is better than going to McDonald's. Best Hot Grill is our sponsor, and we like using Best Hot Grill for our burgers rather than going to McDonald's.
You can make a much better burger on a...
But if he can put together an ad that has 5 working actors 50 years from now, that might be a key. I don't know that you and I are going to be working 50 years from now.
I'm sure you're not.
So the question, can Rhett get besthotgrill.com to do a jingle like that? I don't know.
You know, by the way, you know who wrote the jingle?
Who?
Barry Manilow.
Not surprised. That's what he did. I am, however, surprised that you didn't mention the fireballs and the fire logs, which are the seasonal item at besthotgrill.com right now. If you go there and get your seasonal fireballs or seasonal log, you might also look at the Try Before You Buy program for the Best Hot Grill, because honestly, folks, this is the best grill in America. And I'm back with my Best Hot Grill, and we will be using my Best Hot Grill regardless of the weather. It's out on the porch. Doesn't matter if it gets really cold in Virginia, because it doesn't take but 3 minutes to do a burger or a steak or chicken to excellence, because Best Hot Grill Solaire Infrared Grills, the best grill made in the world, is made in California by Rhett and Irene at besthotgrill.com. Also, please do not forget that Relief Factor Studio will be up and running, I hope, tomorrow, if Xfinity gets over there and redoes all the whatever Dwayne did to it, undoes what Dwayne did. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Good, Hugh. How are you?
I am great. In fact, after today's program, I will be walking over to the early voting station in Virginia and cast my ballot for Donald Trump and JD Vance. It's a bit surreal, Senator, and it must be for you. Do you pinch yourself every now and then, or when you're fishing with the Ruthless guys and say, this is actually happening?
I pinch myself every day, Hugh, and in particular when people send me their ballots with of course, my name on it and President Trump's name on it. It's a pretty crazy feeling. I just try to enjoy it and do what I can to make sure we win, Hugh, which, frankly, right now I feel like we're in a very good spot.
I do, too. I want to get to the politics in a moment. I want to start with breaking news, though. Last night, Reuters reported the United States is investigating the leak of a pair of highly classified intelligence documents describing Israel's preparations for a retaliatory strike on Iran, House Speaker Mike Johnson said on Sunday. The documents appear to have been prepared by the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, describing U.S. interpretations of Israeli Air Force and Navy planning based on satellite imagery from October 15th and 16th. Senator, that's treason. What will be your advice to President Trump if he becomes the 47th president on pursuing the perpetrators of that?
Well, we have to investigate it aggressively, Hugh. I mean, you're right that it's treason. There's a lot that we don't know. We don't know how big the leak was. We don't know, of course, when you have leaks like this and the documents that have been taken or been revealed, there are also probably documents that we don't know about that might be included in the leak. And so we have to be very focused on understanding fully the extent of the intelligence breach. You probably have across various agencies hundreds, maybe even thousands of people who have access to these documents. So it's going to take some time, I think, to identify who did it. But we have to be really aggressive about this stuff, Hugh. I mean, so this intelligence that gets collected, whether from ourselves or our allies, it comes from painstaking work, dangerous work. I mean, sometimes people lose their lives in order to get us this stuff. And if we don't protect it, then we're not going to have much national security.
Jonathan Pollard spent 27 years in federal prison, rightly, because he was spying for Israel. This isn't a question about being pro-Israel or anti. It's a question about, if you take the oath, you cannot leak our material to the world because you don't like Israel. And I want someone to really take it to the max, make sure he gets prosecuted the way that they've gone after Donald Trump wrongly, to the full extent of the law.
Look, Hugh, I agree with you, and I think that we have to do that. We have to identify who did it and hopefully prosecute them to the full extent of the law. I think it also illustrates how increasingly within the bureaucracy of our government, Hugh, you have people who think of themselves as independent actors pursuing their own policy. I mean, you put it very well. Whether you're pro-Israel, anti-Israel, pro any country or anti any country, you have to be pro the United States of America. And the most important part of that is actually following the political leadership as they drive American public policy. Your job is to help implement that policy, direct that policy, gather intelligence for that policy. Your job is not to conduct diplomacy yourself by leaking intelligence that is going to be harmful or helpful to one party or another.
And we need to deter it. Yeah, we need to deter.
Yeah.
Now, Senator, I want to get to the question that you were trying to answer when either Margaret Brennan or CBS cut off your mic. Well done in the vice presidential debate, by the way. But you were talking about TPS. I honestly don't know how 20,000 Haitians end up in Springfield What is your understanding and what were you trying to explain to the American people about TPS when your mic was cut off?
Well, it's TPS and mass parole, Hugh. So first of all, the move that Democrats make when they're talking about these mass parolees, and of course there are a lot of Haitians in that group, but a lot of other nationalities as well, is they'll say, well, these folks are legal, right? And when you hear legal immigrant, what you think, of course, is a person who came here, paid the fees, spent 10 years getting everything processed, got a green card, and then eventually became an American citizen. And that is just not what's going on here. In fact, courts, I think, are going to consistently find that Kamala Harris's mass parole program is illegal. They use things like the CBP One app to grant parole at an industrial scale, when really what parole is there for is for the president to be able to make case-by-case exceptions to American immigration law. To say that these folks are legal immigrants because Kamala Harris violated the law to grant them legal status, it's just preposterous, and we have to push back against what I think is an Orwellian inversion of immigration language.
Now, the trend line is that if we have a Kamala Harris, Tim Walz administration, the problem of the last 3.5 years will more than double, because that's what happened with her and Biden following former President Trump. Do you expect, is that fair to say, if you don't like what happened, expect twice as much of it in the next 4 years?
Yeah, twice as much or 3 times as much. I mean, look, on the immigration stuff, you're seeing this already where the media is trying to say that illegal border crossings are down, and that's actually not true. What's happening is they're shifting from illegal border crossings at the southern border to facilitated mass parole coming in through the ports of entry, through airports into our country. So these guys are actually taking Kamala Harris's open border, they're giving it technological sophistication and scale, and you think this isn't going to get much worse during Kamala Harris's administration. I think you're lying to yourself. Everything that's gone wrong, it's going to get so much worse, and that's particularly true when it comes to the green energy stuff, which has caused a lot of the inflation. It's just bad news, and that's the message that we're trying to carry in these final 2 weeks.
Senator Vance, I want to turn also to the Washington Post front page this morning, a story, the headline of which is, housing costs are rising everywhere, but especially in the swing states. What's remarkable about the story is they do not do what Elon Musk did over the weekend, detail the regulatory burden on home builders. He was talking about the regulatory burden on SpaceX, but it's 3 times as much for a home builder in California. Federal level, you got the EPA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps of Engineers, the state, you got Cal EPA, CARB, the California Air Resources Board, Regional Water Quality Control Board, then the local stuff. Do you think the federal government can somehow reduce the regulatory burden to lower the cost of getting a home?
Well, I think that we can. Of course, some of these regulations cut across interstate commerce, Hugh, and that's something the federal government has obviously very direct authority over. I think some of this stuff goes back to NEPA, various federal environmental regulations. And then, of course, a lot of this is driven by energy, meaning if energy is more expensive, then the cost of building a home is going to be more expensive. That, of course, gets passed on to consumers. I think we're all talking, of course, about supply issues, Hugh, and that is a big part of the problem is we're not building enough homes. I also think we have to be honest that if we're importing millions upon millions of illegal aliens, we've got to put them somewhere, and that increased demand on housing is also driving the cost of American homes through the roof. So I really think we have to address both the supply and the demand side here, cut down on illegal immigration, build more homes, lower interest rates. That's how you solve the housing crisis in this country.
Housing is one market. From the cheapest apartment in the most dilapidated structure to the most expensive home, it's all one market. Put pressure on any segment, you influence other segments. Senator, what's the closing strategy for you? Where are you going in the next 2 weeks?
Pretty much everywhere. I'm headed to Texas for a fundraiser tonight and then to Arizona and Nevada early this week. I think we're going to be in North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, all those states in the next few days. So I think the president is doing a big rally in Greenville, North Carolina today. So we're really just hitting the big 7 battleground states. I think, you'll see me mostly in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan down the stretch. But look, man, we've got to win all these states, and I think that we will. We just got to make sure that people see us and drive home the message that we could have a much more prosperous, lower inflation, more affordable country. We just have to get back to the common sense policies of Donald Trump.
Senator, I want to close with the biggest missing ingredient of this election. Neither candidate has been asked about Xi Jinping and his intentions. and the Chinese Communist Party and its ambitions. How do you assess, not the tariff policy, but generally, what do you think Xi wants? What do you think the CCP intends?
Well, it's a very important, but also very complicated question, Hugh. And the way that I think about it is it's, of course, impossible to know how much they want Taiwan. They certainly want it. We don't know how much they want it. And I think part of American policy over the next few years has to be to make it as costly as possible for them to seize it by force, right? This is why it's important to get the Taiwanese the defensive weapons systems they need, is because if we make it harder for Xi to take Taiwan, that's going to change his calculus as much as possible. When you war game this out, Hugh, we know that once the Chinese gain a foothold in Taiwan, it becomes extremely difficult to do anything from there. So what you really have to do is make this thing as costly as possible to establish that foothold. I think that has been the main thrust of American national security policy. Unfortunately, the implementation under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris has been really lacking. So we've got to establish deterrence. We've got to get them the weapons that they need. We've got to make this as costly as possible. And I think if we do all those things, we can make sure that Taiwan remains independent.
Do you think Xi, though, I'll tell you what, I think he's a Leninist, a hardcore communist, and that he believes that, he really has it in his soul, and he's ruthless. Is that your understanding of the man?
I think he's certainly ruthless. I don't know that he is a Leninist as much as a sort of ultra-Chinese nationalist. In some ways, I think that, the Nazis in the 30s and 40s are sort of a better middle frame for Xi than maybe the Soviets of the 50s and 60s. But look, man, it's very complicated. It's a very old civilization with a lot of historical baggage. And I think that we just have to recognize that they see themselves, basically Western dominance of the last few centuries, they see as sort of a blip in the historical radar. They think Chinese civilization is meant to rule the world. And so I think that we have to recognize they have extremely ambitious plans, and we have to have our own ambitious plans to counter it.
My last question, Senator, because I know you have a hard out at 46. The defense budget will be on the table the moment you take office if you win. What will be your advice to President Trump about immediate lifts of that and things like expanding the Philadelphia shipyard? 30 seconds, Senator.
Very simple. We want to build more weapons. We have to build more ships. Part of that is spending, Hugh, but also part of it is procurement. I think we have to fix the procurement process in this country, make it much more efficient. That will be my advice.
Senator JD Vance, thank you for stopping by. Good luck in your last 2 weeks. It's going to be an honor to vote for you later today and President Trump. I appreciate it. Keep talking to me throughout the vice presidential year. JD Vance, Senator from Ohio, future vice president. The interview I just did with Senator Vance will be posted. Its transcript within 45 minutes. The audio is already over at HughHewitt.com. I'm joined now by Ty Lassiter of Key City Capital. He is a sponsor of our show. He's a friend of mine. Hi, Ty. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Hugh. I'm feeling ambitious this morning. How are you?
Now, that's a great thing. It's a great way to be. I'm ambitious every morning. I'm ambitious to get to the end of the show. Got to remember to tell people I'm an investor in Key City Capital along with the fetching Mrs. Hewitt. I read the prospectus, so should you. I am a qualified, whatever they call that kind of investor, accredited investor, and you can't get into the fund I got into, but that, and Key City is a sponsor. I think that's all my disclosures. Now, Ty, I just had JD Vance on. We're talking about a front page story in the Washington Post on housing costs in the swing states going through the ceilings. And JD and I both agree. It's all one market, from the most dilapidated apartment in the worst part of America to the most expensive home in Silicon Valley. Am I right in that? You build homes and let people invest in apartment complexes. Am I right? It's all one market.
That's right. It's just exploding. We're seeing prices increase across every aspect of the United States right now. I'm glad you had JD Vance on. That's amazing. I'm looking forward to what I'm hearing in Wall Street about his and former President Trump's chances right now. But we need that change quickly. I mean, restaurants, we're seeing empty tables at restaurants shutting down, because what I have found is that many of the Americans that we speak to, that you speak to on your show, have done a great job of earning an income, and most of them do a pretty good job of savings. But what I have found in the ability to create and generate wealth is that 80% of your focus has to be directed towards your investment performance and tax mitigation, how much money that you're actually getting to keep and not turn around and give back to the government. And what I have found is that many people are falling short in that area, whether they're high net worth individuals or it's somebody that's done a great job paying off their debt and they're looking at retiring, and that retirement age is just getting later and later and later in life because of the cost of inflation that we're seeing in the housing market, in every aspect of the United States right now. And that's where we focus. We focus on helping helping our clients generate wealth quicker by focusing their aspects on the business side of their equation, really looking at investment performance, how well you can grow your wealth and how fast you can grow your wealth by diversification. Most people are in stocks.
And that's what I want people to understand. I don't know if Key City Capital is right for everyone. It was right for the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I to buy an investment unit in, I think it was fund number 3, because they go around, they buy apartment complexes or they build them, and I have no liability and I get no phone calls, but I get appreciation, depreciation, and cash flow out of it. I don't know what fund is open now or where you're building, Ty, but what is your basic pitch to investors as to why they ought to take a look at keycitycapital.com/Hugh?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to that 4 keys to wealth. With most investments, you're not going to generate the potential for investment growth as quickly as you will when you diversify your portfolio. And we're an aspect of that diversification. Slow growth mutual funds and stocks and bonds, they don't have the potential for cash flow and appreciation and equity build, as well as tax mitigation. With real estate, we bring in the tax mitigation side and give the aspect of growing investments quickly, but also with that, having a tax mitigation piece that helps you keep more of your investment performance in your pocket so that you can grow your wealth more quickly.
So how long does the average fund last for, Ty? I don't really follow it. We put the money in and then we just take the checks when you guys send them to us, and I eventually figure you'll cash us out. But how long does the fund usually go for?
We typically target for 5 years. I've had funds as short as 2.5 years. I've had funds as long as 7 years. We really play the real estate cycle. We don't want to sell in a market like what we've seen for the last 18 months. We're finally eking into a market where it's a seller's market. Actually had a really good offer on a portfolio of ours in Florida right now that we're entertaining. So we really play the market. When the market is down, we're not going to sell real estate. We're going to buy real estate and hold it. When the market starts to go back up is when we're going to sell. So what I'm wanting to do, I think this week with your listeners, with our investors, is I really want to focus on that 80% of investment performance and tax mitigation. So for any of your listeners listening right now, we're going to offer a free wealth check to everybody. You all go to the doctor every year, you get a health check. I want to be your wealth check. We'll look at your investment performance, see how you're performing in your current portfolios. We'll look at your taxes, see how much you're saving or paying in taxes, and how much we can help you generate in savings there on that aspect.
Oh, very good. I didn't know that. keycitycapital.com/Hugh. Ty and his team are experts. They're really great guys. I've enjoyed working with them for the last 3 years. And sure enough, I get my reports every month. I actually read a few of them, but I'm the most passive of passive investors, so you might not be like me. I mean, I really, not my game, Ty. I don't know what you guys do, but you're doing very well with me, so I appreciate it very much. Thank you. keycitycapital.com/Hugh. Stick around for Air Check. JD Vance audio is already posted. Note to CBS. We'll have the transcript up within an hour. You could have done that with Kamala Harris 2 weeks ago, and you didn't. What are you hiding? Because the way the news business works is you got to tell people what candidates actually have to say, all of it.